The world beneath him was dead. Ash and smoke covered everything as far as the eye could see. Once this place had been the home of the Varkai, a proud alien race known for their strength, honor, and strange, beautiful cities carved into stone. Now it was only ruins. The air smelled of burnt metal and old blood. Commander Elias Kane stood on the edge of a broken ridge, looking down at what was left of the valley below. His armor was cracked, his face streaked with dirt and dried sweat. Behind his helmet visor, his eyes were cold and tired, the eyes of a man who had seen too much war. The war had lasted 7 long years. Humanity and the Varkai had once traded goods, shared science, even explored stars together. But greed and fear had turned them into enemies. One misunderstanding had led to another, and before anyone could stop it, the galaxies were on fire. Kane had fought in almost every major battle. He had lost soldiers, friends, even a piece of himself. But now, standing here, he was told this would be the last mission. He touched his earpiece as a voice crackled through the comms. "Commander Kane, orders from High Command. This is it. The final Varkai base is under that mountain. You are to finish them. No survivors." Kane didn't answer right away. He just watched the red sky where human warships floated like dark giants, their cannons glowing faintly. Victory. That's what everyone on Earth wanted. One last strike, one final explosion, and humanity would win the war. He slowly raised his hand. "All units prepare the orbital strike," he said, his voice steady but low. Around him, soldiers moved quickly, checking weapons, activating targeting drones. The air was heavy, almost too heavy to breathe. Kane could feel the world itself holding its breath. Then something strange happened. A sound, faint, distant, and completely out of place, came through his headset. It wasn't static. It wasn't radio noise. It was soft, high-pitched, almost like a whimper. He frowned. "Control, did you hear that?" "Negative, Commander." "Repeat, negative." But there it was again, this time louder. A sound no one should ever hear on a battlefield. Crying. Kane froze. The sound came through the drone's live feed from inside the mountain base. He ordered the visuals to be sent to his visor. A second later, the image appeared. At first, all he saw were shadows and debris. Then the camera turned, and his heart stopped. Huddled in the corner of a dark hall were small, fragile shapes. Tiny Varkai cubs, dozens of them. They looked like scaled children, eyes wide with fear, holding on to one another. A few older Varkai, wounded, exhausted, were trying to protect them. Kane's breath caught in his throat. "Those are civilians," he whispered. The officer on the other end sounded annoyed. "Negative, sir. No civilians are left. All Varkai are combatants." But Kane knew what he was seeing. Those weren't soldiers. Those were just children. The order from High Command echoed in his mind. No survivors. He felt the words burning in his chest. He had obeyed every order for 7 years. He had done things he could never forget. But this was different. He zoomed in closer on the video feed. One small cub stared directly into the camera, big golden eyes wet with tears. It looked scared, confused, helpless. Kane felt something twist inside him. A memory. His daughter, back home on Earth, running through the garden, laughing, holding his hand before he left for war. She would be about that age now. Kane closed his eyes. His hand hovered over the control switch that would unleash the final strike. He knew what would happen if he hesitated. He would lose command. He would lose everything. But if he pressed that button, he would lose something far greater, his humanity. The voice of his second-in-command broke the silence. "Sir, the strike is ready." "Awaiting your mark." Kane said nothing. His soldiers watched him, confused. The sound of the cubs' cries played again through the comms, echoing through the dead air like ghosts. He lowered his hand slowly. "Abort the strike," he said quietly. Everyone froze. "Sir, you heard me." "Abort the strike." There was a long silence before the voice of High Command shouted through the line. "Commander Kane, this is a direct violation of orders." "You are jeopardizing the mission!" Kane didn't respond. He turned his eyes toward the burning horizon, then back at the mountain. "We're not soldiers anymore if we kill what can't fight back," he said softly, almost to himself. He took a deep breath. "Prepare a ground team." "We're going in," shock filled the comms. Some of his men whispered, some protested, but Kane didn't care. The war might end today, but he refused to let it end like this. As the human troops began their descent into the valley, the red light of the burning sky fell on Kane's face. His expression was calm, but his heart pounded with fear and defiance. He knew what this meant. Disobeying command was treason. But for the first time in years, he felt something pure. He felt right. Up above, the warships floated silently, their cannons waiting. Below, a single man walked toward the enemy, not to destroy them, but to save what little innocence remained in the galaxy. And for the first time since the war began, Elias Kane hoped, truly hoped, that maybe humanity hadn't lost itself after all. The air inside the dropship was thick with silence. Every soldier stared at Commander Elias Kane, some with confusion, others with fear. They had heard his words. They knew what he had done. He had stopped the orbital strike. He had disobeyed a direct order from high command, and in war, that was no small thing. The ship descended slowly through dark smoke. The valley below was filled with wreckage, metal bones of destroyed machines, broken armor, and the burnt remains of two armies that had fought too long. The silence was broken by Lieutenant Harris, his voice cold but uncertain. "Sir, permission to speak freely?" Kane didn't look at him. "Granted. Why are we going in there?" "You saw the feed. Those are aliens, sir. The enemy. We're supposed to finish them, not play heroes." Kane turned his head slightly, his eyes tired but steady. "I saw children, Lieutenant." "That's not the enemy. That's life trying to survive," no one replied. The soldiers shifted uncomfortably. Most of them had lost friends in this war. Good people. Some wanted revenge. Others just wanted it to be over. But saving alien children? That wasn't in their mission plan. The dropship landed near the base of the mountain. Dust and ash swirled around as the hatch opened. Kane stepped out first, rifle in hand, scanning the horizon. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. His HUD showed the mountain's interior map. Deep tunnels, energy readings, heat signatures. Yes, the cubs were still there. And yes, a few adult Varkai too. Probably guards or parents. He motioned for his team to follow. "Stay sharp. Weapons low. We're not here to fight unless they make us." Harris frowned. "Sir, this is madness." "If HQ finds out, they already know," Kane interrupted. "And I'll deal with them later." The team moved slowly through the entrance, flashlights cutting through darkness. The air inside the tunnel was thick and warm, filled with dust and smoke. Every step echoed off the stone walls. Then came the smell, something sour mixed with burnt fuel. They passed broken weapons, alien armor, and the marks of a brutal last stand. When they reached the central chamber, the sight stopped everyone in their tracks. The cubs, small, scaled bodies pressed together, eyes wide with fear. Their skin shimmered faintly in the light, shades of green and gold. Some were crying softly. A few injured adult Varkai stood between the cubs and the humans, clutching primitive energy rifles that barely worked. The moment froze in time. No one moved. Then Kane did something no one expected. He lowered his rifle and took off his helmet. He let them see his face, human, tired, not cruel. He raised both hands slowly, palms open. "We're not here to kill you," he said quietly. "We just want to help." The Varkai adults hissed something in their own language. They didn't trust him. Not yet. One of them, a tall female with a wounded arm, aimed her weapon straight at Kane's chest. His soldiers instantly raised theirs. "Sir, hostile target, hold your fire," Kane ordered sharply. No one breathed. The alien's hand shook. Kane slowly took a step forward. "I know you don't believe me," he said softly. "But the war's over, at least for me." "Let the children live." The alien's yellow eyes flickered with confusion. She looked at the cubs, then back at him. The moment stretched like eternity. Then finally, she lowered her weapon. Kane exhaled, his muscles tense with relief. He gestured for his medic to move forward and help the wounded, but before they could act, a loud voice exploded through his earpiece. "Commander Kane, this is High Command! You are violating orders! You are hereby relieved of duty! Turn back immediately!" Every soldier heard it. Every face turned toward Kane. He didn't answer. He just kept walking toward the cubs. "Commander, do you copy?" He switched off the radio. The silence that followed was heavy. A silence that felt like crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Kane knelt beside one of the cubs. It looked up at him, trembling. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small ration bar. Slowly, carefully, he offered it. The cub hesitated, sniffed it, and took it. The soldiers behind him watched in disbelief. Lieutenant Harris whispered under his breath, "He's really doing it." Outside, thunder rumbled, but it wasn't weather. It was the sound of approaching engines, Earth's fleet, positioning for another strike. Kane looked up toward the ceiling as if he could see through the rock. He knew what that sound meant. If they launched another attack, everyone here, cubs, aliens, humans, would be gone. He tapped his comm again and sent one short transmission to the fleet. "This is Commander Kane. There are civilians in the mountain. Do not fire. Repeat, do not fire. No reply." Only static. He clenched his fists. His voice was calm, but his heart raced. He had made his choice. There was no turning back now. If saving innocent lives made him a traitor, then he would carry that title proudly. Kane turned to his squad. "Get ready. If the fleet fires, we protect the cubs first. No matter what." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. But something in his voice, steady, human, filled with conviction, made them obey. For the first time since the war began, they weren't fighting for orders. They were fighting for something real, and deep inside the mountain, with alien children clinging to life and bombs waiting above, Commander Elias Kane stood ready to defend Mercy itself. Smoke drifted through the tunnels like ghostly fog. The dim light from human helmets flickered across stone walls scarred by battle. Commander Elias Kane walked ahead in silence. His rifle lowered but ready. Behind him, his squad moved carefully, not soldiers now, but uneasy guardians in a place that still smelled of war. The alien cubs huddled together under a damaged archway. Some were too weak to stand, others clung to each other, their scaled skin reflecting faint blue light. The wounded adult Varkai watched closely, unsure if these humans were saviors or executioners. Kane knelt beside a small cub whose breathing was shallow. He tore open a field med kit and handed a small vial to the medic. "Try this. It's human medicine. It might help." The medic hesitated. "Sir, we don't even know if their biology—" "Try," Kane said softly. They did. The cub whimpered as the injector hissed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the child's breathing eased. Its tiny hand, scaled and trembling, reached out and touched Kane's wrist. He froze. The gesture was small, but it hit him harder than any weapon could. Behind them, Lieutenant Harris paced nervously. "Sir, HQ will have us executed for this. We've already broken every rule in the book." "Then we'll write a new one," Kane replied quietly. The words hung in the air. Moments later, a deep rumble shook the ground. Dust rained from the ceiling. The soldiers looked up, fear in their eyes. What was that? Kane tapped his wrist display. The radar showed movement, multiple energy signatures above the mountain. "They're getting ready to fire again," he said grimly. "We need to move." He turned to the Varkai mother, the tall alien who had lowered her weapon before. She still didn't trust him completely, but when he gestured for her to follow, she gave a short nod. "There's an old tunnel on the north side," she said in a rough, broken human accent. "It leads to the river valley." Kane was surprised she spoke his language. "Then that's our exit," he said. "Let's move before they bury us alive." The group began to move, slowly, carefully, through the tunnels. Human soldiers helped carry the smaller cubs. The Varkai mother limped beside Kane, guiding the way. For a few short minutes, it felt like there was hope. Then the comm crackled again. A voice, harsh, furious, filled the channel. "Commander Kane, you are relieved of duty. You are under arrest for treason. Stand down immediately." Kane didn't stop walking. "There are civilians here. You can court-martial me later, but if you fire now, you'll kill children." "Those aren't civilians!" the voice barked. "Those are enemy spawn. Finish the mission or we'll finish it for you." Kane closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and switched off the comm again. He had made his choice. Outside, thunder rolled. The sky above the mountain flashed with white light. The humans had launched the first wave. The shock wave hit seconds later. The ground roared like an angry beast. Rocks cracked, tunnels caved in, and the lights flickered out. Soldiers shouted. The cubs screamed. Kane grabbed two of them, shielding them under his armor as debris crashed down around them. "Move! Move!" he yelled. Harris and the medic helped the others. They pushed through the collapsing tunnel, coughing from dust and smoke. The Varkai mother stumbled, her injured leg giving out, but Kane grabbed her arm and pulled her forward. When they finally broke through the last wall of stone and emerged into the open, the sight behind them was nightmare and fire. The mountain, the last Varkai base, was being destroyed from orbit. Flames licked the sky. A wave of ash rolled across the valley. Kane fell to his knees, still holding a cub against his chest. His armor was dented, his face covered in dust. Around him, only a few soldiers remained alive. The rest were gone. He looked at them, the survivors. Then at the Varkai children, clinging to one another in fear. No victory. No medals, just silence and loss. The Varkai mother limped to him. Her eyes glowed faintly in the firelight. For a long moment, they just looked at each other. Two soldiers from opposite sides, both broken, both tired. Finally, she said quietly, "Why?" Kane's voice was rough. "Because someone had to stop killing. Someone had to start saving." She stared at him for a long time, then slowly reached out her clawed hand. Kane took it, a human hand and an alien hand, enemies, united under a burning sky. The medic whispered softly, "Sir." "What now?" Kane looked at the horizon. The fleet was still there, hovering like metal predators above the clouds. He knew command would hunt him down. He knew Earth would call him a traitor. But when he looked at the cubs, alive, breathing, safe for now, he felt something stronger than fear. Peace. "We find somewhere safe," he said at last. "And we keep them alive. That's all that matters now." The soldiers nodded slowly. Even Harris didn't argue this time. As they moved down the valley, the ground still trembled behind them. Kane didn't look back. There was nothing left to look at, only ghosts and fire. He had lost his command. He had lost his war. But maybe, just maybe, he had saved his soul, and somewhere, far above the smoke, on the human flagship orbiting the planet, an officer stared at Kane's last transmission, the one he'd sent before the attack. "If we destroy everything that fears us, what will be left worth protecting?" The message played on repeat, echoing through the command deck, a question that no one dared to answer. The sun rose slowly over the ruined valley, painting the sky in dull red and orange. Smoke still rose from the mountain, the place that had almost become a tomb for all of them. Commander Elias Kane stood on a ridge, his armor blackened by soot and dust. His helmet hung from his side, his face tired but alive. Behind him, a few of his soldiers were helping the wounded Varkai and their cubs settle near the riverbank. The air smelled of burnt metal and ash, but also of something new, hope. For the first time in years, humans and Varkai stood side by side, not as enemies, but as survivors. The Varkai mother, the tall, scaled woman who had guided them through the tunnels, sat quietly near the fire, wrapping a cloth around her injured leg. The cubs huddled around her, watching the humans carefully, still unsure if they were truly safe. Kane walked toward her. He moved slowly, making sure not to startle the cubs. When he was close enough, he crouched and offered her a small canteen of water. She hesitated, then accepted it. "You saved us," she said, her voice rough and low. "But why?" "You are human. Your kind destroyed my world." Kane nodded slowly. "I know, and I wish I could change that. But not today. Today, I just wanted to stop the killing." She looked at him with sharp yellow eyes. You would die for the children of your enemy? Kane looked toward the cubs. One of them was sleeping against a rock, his small chest rising and falling softly. Another tried to play with a human soldier's glove, and the soldier, unsure what to do, let the little one tug it away. I have a daughter, Kane said quietly. She's back on Earth. I haven't seen her in years. Every night I told myself this war would keep her safe. But when I saw your cubs, I realized I was lying to myself. I wasn't keeping anyone safe. I was just making more children grow up without parents. The Varkai mother studied his face. There was no anger there, only exhaustion and truth. She lowered her gaze and nodded slowly. My name is Sira, she said finally. The cubs, they are all that's left of my clan. If you had not stopped the fire from the sky, they would be gone too. Kane gave a small nod. Then let's make sure they don't die now. Sira blinked, confused. What do you mean? He pointed toward the horizon. In the distance, dark shapes moved against the clouds. Ships, searching, scanning. The human fleet will come again, and when they find us, they won't ask questions. Sira's expression hardened. Then we run, Kane smiled faintly. Running's not easy when you've got a dozen hungry cubs and half a dozen wounded soldiers. But yes, we'll move, north, through the canyons. Maybe we can find a place the scanners won't reach. Sira watched him for a long moment, then said softly, You would lead us. Protect us? Yes, Kane replied. Until I can't anymore. For a long time, no one spoke. The humans and the Varkai shared quiet looks, uncertain, but slowly understanding that they needed each other now. Then, suddenly, a sound split the air. A loud mechanical hum echoed from above. The soldiers looked up. Drones. 3 of them, flying low, scanning the ground with bright blue lights. Get down! Kane shouted. The group scattered for cover. Kane grabbed his rifle and took position behind a rock. The drones hovered closer, their sensors whirring. They've found us, Harris yelled. Don't shoot, Kane barked. They'll call in the fleet if they detect weapons fire, but it was too late. One of the drones locked onto movement near the cubs. It mistook them for hostiles and charged its plasma cannon. Sira screamed. The cubs ducked. Kane didn't think. He ran. He leapt from the rocks and tackled the drone mid-air, firing 3 quick bursts from his rifle. Sparks exploded as the drone crashed into the dirt. Kane rolled to his feet, panting. The other 2 drones turned toward him instantly. Sir! Harris shouted. A flash of light, gunfire from both humans and Varkai, cut through the air. The combined volley shredded the drones before they could fire. Silence returned, broken only by the soft crackle of burning metal. Kane stood still, breathing hard. His armor was scorched, his face smeared with ash. Around him, the cubs stared in shock. And something else, trust. For the first time, they weren't afraid. One small cub ran forward and wrapped its arms around Kane's leg. Sira limped closer. Her expression softened, the hard edge in her eyes now replaced with something unfamiliar. You fight for them, she said quietly. Not for glory, not for power, just for life. Kane gave a faint smile. Maybe that's what soldiers should have been fighting for all along. Sira nodded slowly. Then perhaps we are not enemies anymore. He met her gaze and held it. No, he said softly. Not anymore. For the first time in years, Kane felt something stir inside him, something he thought war had burned away forever. Hope. As night fell, the survivors packed their few supplies and began to move north. The cubs rode on the soldiers' backs or walked beside them, holding their tiny glowing stones for light. Behind them, the mountain smoldered quietly, its fire dying under the weight of the stars. The war wasn't over, not yet. But here, in this small, fragile truce between enemies, something far more important had begun. The start of trust. The wind howled through the canyons as the survivors marched north. Sharp red rocks rose on both sides, glowing under the pale light of the twin moons. The air was dry and thin, carrying the faint smell of smoke from distant fires. Commander Elias Kane led the way, his eyes scanning the cliffs for movement. Behind him, his soldiers carried supplies and weapons salvaged from the ruins. Sira and the surviving Varkai moved quietly beside them, the cubs clinging to their parents or riding on the soldiers' backs. They had been walking for 2 days. Food was scarce. Sleep came only in short moments. But for the first time, there was no hatred, only survival. Harris walked beside Kane, glancing up at the dark sky. "You think Command knows we're alive?" he asked. Kane shook his head. "If they did, they would have sent a gunship to finish the job." "So we're ghosts now?" "Maybe," Kane said. "Better ghosts than monsters." Harris sighed. "Still, the others will come. You know that, right? The fleet won't leave any Varkai alive." Kane didn't answer. He just kept walking. Deep inside, he already knew it was true. The human fleet would come. They would sweep the skies clean, no survivors, no mercy. That was the order. End it. The same words he had refused to follow. Now, to his own people, he was the traitor. They stopped at dusk, making a small camp near a half-collapsed cave. The soldiers set up motion sensors while Sira gathered the cubs close. The children were exhausted, their scales dull from hunger and dust. Kane walked to the edge of the camp, staring at the night sky. The stars shimmered faintly through a thin layer of smoke. Somewhere up there, human warships floated, waiting, scanning, ready to burn whatever they found. Sira approached quietly, holding a small glowing stone that cast a soft blue light across her hands. "You do not sleep," she said. "Sleep doesn't come easy," Kane replied. "You fear your own kind will find you." "They will," he said simply. "Humans don't forgive rebellion, especially not from their own commander." Sira studied him for a moment. "You risk everything for us, even your life." Kane gave a faint, tired smile. "Life's worth nothing if you can't live with what you've done." There was silence for a while, just the wind whispering through the rocks. Then a faint sound cut through the air, a low rumble. Kane froze. He knew that sound, the deep vibration of engines, the kind that came from orbiting ships. He lifted his wrist communicator. The signal was faint, but still there. "Command unit to ground team, respond," a voice crackled. Kane recognized it instantly. Admiral Rourke, his superior officer. "Commander Kane, we've detected your beacon. Your mission report shows incomplete. Confirm elimination of all Varkai hostiles." Kane hesitated. The entire camp went silent. Every soldier looked at him. Even Sira could tell something was wrong. "Admiral," Kane began slowly. "The base was destroyed. The war is over." "We'll be the judge of that," Rourke replied coldly. "Scans show biological heat signatures in your sector." "You are ordered to complete the purge, immediately." Kane's jaw tightened. He turned and looked at the cubs sleeping beside the fire. One of them had a toy, a small piece of metal shaped like a ship. It gleamed faintly in the firelight. He pressed the communicator again. "Negative, Admiral. There are only civilians here. Children." The line went silent for a moment. Then Rourke's voice returned, harder than steel. "That's an order, Commander. Failure to comply will be treated as treason." Kane slowly lowered the device. Harris stepped forward, eyes wide. "Sir, what do we do?" Kane didn't answer. His hands were shaking, not from fear but from the weight of the choice. Sira stepped closer. "Your people want us dead," she said quietly. "Will you obey them? Or your heart?" He looked at her. Really looked at her. Her eyes reflected both pain and strength. She was an enemy, yes, but she was also a mother, a leader, and someone who had trusted him when no one else did. Kane took a deep breath. "Harris, get everyone ready. We move before dawn." "Move where?" "Underground. If they scan from orbit, we'll vanish under the canyons. Maybe it'll buy us time." Harris hesitated. "Sir, if the fleet lands, then we fight," Kane said firmly. "Not against the Varkai. Against anyone who tries to wipe them out." Sira's eyes widened. "You would fight your own kind?" Kane turned toward the dark horizon. "If it means stopping another genocide, yes." As the first light of dawn touched the cliffs, the survivors moved again, deeper into the canyon, where the scanners could not easily reach. Above them, The clouds began to glow. A strange orange shimmer spread across the sky. Kane stopped and looked up. They were here. Human warships broke through the clouds like burning comets, their engines roaring. Dozens of them, sleek, silver, merciless. The sky itself seemed to burn. The fleet was descending, to finish what Kane refused to do. Kane turned to his people, humans and Varkai alike. "They're coming," he said, his voice steady. "But we're not running anymore." Syrah's hand tightened on her weapon. "Then today we fight together." Kane nodded. Together, the wind picked up. Dust swirled around them. In the distance, the sound of thunder rolled through the canyons. But it wasn't thunder. It was war, coming again. The morning sky was no longer blue. It burned like fire. Dozens of human warships cut through the clouds, sleek, silver, heartless machines. Their engines screamed across the valley, shaking the ground below. Elias Kane stood at the mouth of the canyon, watching. His heart pounded. Behind him, soldiers and Varkai scrambled to hide the cubs deep inside the caves. The wind carried the sound of engines, the smell of burning air. Human voices filled his communicator again. "Commander Kane, respond immediately. This is your final warning. Withdraw and evacuate all human personnel. Orbital strike will begin in 2 minutes." He stared at the small device in his hand. The same technology that once gave him power, now a tool of destruction. Harris ran up, out of breath. "Sir, the fleet's locking targets. They think we're hostiles." "They're not thinking," Kane said bitterly. "They're following orders." He looked back at the caves where the cubs hid, their glowing eyes full of fear. Syrah stood at the entrance, holding a pulse rifle she could barely lift. "You should go," she said. "Humans don't spare traitors." Kane shook his head. "If I leave, they'll die. If I stay, maybe I can make them see." Syrah's crest flattened against her skull, a gesture of sadness. "Then speak, human. But hurry." Kane took a deep breath and switched his communicator to global broadcast, a channel that reached the entire fleet. "This is Commander Elias Kane of the 3rd Expeditionary Division," he began. "I am reporting from the Varkai Mountain sector. There are civilians here, children. I repeat, civilians. The war is over. You're about to kill the innocent," Static answered him. Then came a cold, familiar voice, Admiral Rourke. "Kane, you were ordered to complete the purge. You disobeyed. You sheltered the enemy. You've betrayed your own species." Kane closed his eyes for a moment. "If defending life is betrayal, then yes," he said quietly. "I am guilty." "You think saving them makes you a hero?" Rourke's voice thundered. "You've doomed us all. The Varkai will rise again and slaughter our colonies." Kane looked around, at Syrah holding the cubs close, at his soldiers standing side by side with aliens once called monsters. "No, Admiral," he said. "They will rise again, and they'll remember who showed them mercy." Rourke's tone turned sharp. "Enough. The fleet fires in 1 minute. You've made your choice, Commander." The transmission ended. Kane's communicator fell silent. Harris grabbed his shoulder. "Sir, they're powering up the cannons." "What do we do?" Kane didn't move. His mind raced. One last idea formed. Dangerous, desperate, but maybe enough. He sprinted toward a nearby rock ledge where their transport beacon was still active. The device glowed faintly, a link to the fleet's targeting systems. If he could override the signal, he could scramble their targeting coordinates, maybe delay the strike. He knelt by the device, typing fast. Lines of code flickered across his screen. Sweat ran down his face. Behind him, the ground trembled as energy pulses began to form in the sky. Harris shouted, "They're charging the main guns! You've got 30 seconds!" Kane worked faster, hands shaking. He knew he couldn't stop the fleet forever, but he could send one last message. He opened the broadcast channel again, but not to command. He sent it to every human receiver within range, ships, stations, colonies. "To all who can hear me," his voice echoed across the stars, calm but strong. "This isn't just about war. This is about who we are. If we destroy every enemy child, every frightened voice that isn't human, what will be left worth protecting?" The beacon sparked violently. Energy surged through the air. "Mercy is not weakness," he continued. "It's what makes us human. If we forget that, then we're already lost." The code finished running. The targeting system scrambled. The fleet's cannons powered down, confused by conflicting signals. But the act overloaded the beacon. The ground erupted in sparks. Kane was thrown backward, smoke rising around him. Sierra ran to him, shouting something in her own language. He coughed, blood on his lips, but smiled faintly. It worked. They'll hesitate now. Above them, the massive ships hovered, motionless for a moment, like beasts uncertain of their prey. Then, slowly, the engines roared again. One ship broke formation, turning away. Then another. Soon, half the fleet began to drift back toward orbit. From the flagship, Admiral Rourke watched in silence. Kane's message still echoed through his mind. He clenched his fists, face unreadable. "You fool!" he whispered. "You might have just saved them." He turned to his crew. "Ceasefire," he ordered at last. Back on the ground, silence fell. The sky cleared, and the orange clouds faded to pale gold. Harris let out a shaky breath. "Sir, they're leaving." Kane sat up slowly, looking at the sky. "No," he said softly. "They're thinking." Sirah knelt beside him, placing a clawed hand on his shoulder. "You spoke and your people listened." He smiled weakly. "Some of them, maybe enough." In the distance, the cubs began to play again, unaware of how close death had come. Kane watched them for a long moment, then turned back to the horizon. "War ends when someone chooses to stop killing," he murmured. "Maybe today we took the first step." The wind carried his words through the valley, soft but powerful. And somewhere far above, a single human ship remained, watching, silent, as if uncertain whether Kane was a traitor or the last true human. Months passed. The war that had raged for years had finally fallen silent. Across the stars, the guns of men and aliens alike went quiet, not because of victory, but because of one man's choice. Commander Elias Kane had vanished after the last broadcast. Official reports called him a deserter. Some whispered that he died in the bombardment. But on a quiet green world far from the front lines, he lived. It was dawn. Light spilled across a valley surrounded by mountains and tall alien trees with silver leaves. The air was clean, full of the sound of running water and distant songs of strange birds. Kane stood near a small shelter made from old ship parts and wood. His uniform was faded and torn, but his eyes were calm for the first time in years. Nearby, the Varkai cubs played by a stream, chasing glowing insects. Their laughter, high and bright, echoed through the valley like music. Sierra approached, carrying a basket of fruit. Her scales caught the morning light, turning gold and green. She looked at Kane, smiling softly. "You work too much?" she said. Kane chuckled, wiping sweat from his brow. "Someone has to keep the walls standing." "Walls?" she teased. "We have peace. No one hunts us here." Kane looked toward the horizon. The smile faded slightly. "For now," Sierra tilted her head. "You still think they will come?" "Humans don't forget easily," he said quietly. "Some will see what I did as mercy. Others will see it as betrayal." Sierra placed the basket down and looked him in the eye. "You saved our young. You gave us life. Whatever they call you, we call you honor." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved gently through the trees, then the ground trembled. Faintly at first, then stronger. Kane stiffened. He knew that sound too well. Engines, ships. He turned, eyes scanning the sky. Two small dots glowed above the clouds, growing larger, descending fast. "No," he whispered. "They found us." Within minutes, the sky was roaring again. A sleek human transport broke through the atmosphere, followed by two escort drones. Kane shouted to the others, "Get the cubs inside! Stay low." But something strange happened. The ships didn't open fire. They slowed. And landed. The hatch hissed open. Dust swirled around the landing site. From inside stepped a figure in a dark gray uniform, Captain Mira Solis. Kane's breath caught. He hadn't seen her in years. Once, she'd served under him, one of his brightest officers. Now she looked older, colder. but her eyes still held that spark of humanity. "Captain," Kane said cautiously. "You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you, sir," she replied. "You're officially dead." "But the dead don't broadcast messages that reach half the galaxy." Kane frowned. "So you heard it." "Everyone did," she said softly. "You made us question what we became." Behind her, the soldiers lowered their weapons. They weren't here to fight. They were listening. Mira stepped closer. "Command wanted me to find you, to bring you back for trial. But when I saw your message again," she paused, looking at the cubs playing by the stream, "I realized maybe the trial already happened, and humanity was the one being judged." Kane's eyes softened. "You don't have to protect me, Mira." "I'm not protecting you," she said. "I'm protecting what you stood for." They walked along the riverbank. Sierra watched from a distance, unsure whether to trust the new arrivals. "You could have ended the war, sir," Mira said. "You had the enemy cornered. Why save them?" Kane picked up a small stone, tossing it into the water. "Because I was tired of winning the wrong war." She looked at him, confused. He continued, voice low and steady. "We called it victory when we destroyed cities, when we burned children who never held a weapon. But somewhere along the way, we stopped being what we were fighting to protect." Mira said nothing. She just stared at the water, her reflection broken by ripples. Finally, she spoke. "Command won't understand. They'll come again." "Then let them come," Kane said calmly. "I won't run anymore." She turned to him, eyes wet with something between anger and sorrow. "You think peace can survive in this galaxy?" "Not yet," Kane said. "But maybe it can begin here." As the sun dipped below the mountains, Mira looked one last time at the valley, at the cubs, at the humans working beside Varkai, at the impossible peace between two enemies. She took off her rank insignia and placed it on a rock beside Kane. "If command asks," she said. "I never found you." Kane smiled faintly. "Then what will you do?" "Go back," she said, "and tell them what I saw." She climbed aboard her ship, the engines humming softly. Before the hatch closed, she turned and said one last thing. "You didn't lose the war. Commander, you saved what we were fighting for." Then the ship lifted off, disappearing into the sky. Kane stood alone for a long time, watching the stars come out. Sierra joined him quietly. Was she friend or enemy? "Neither," he said. She was human, the stars reflected in his eyes. Somewhere out there he knew the fight wasn't over. But it had changed, because for the first time, someone had chosen peace over power, and that choice, that fragile, trembling choice, might just change the future. Years passed. The war between humans and Varkai became a memory, a shadow in history books. The fires that once burned worlds now flickered only in stories told by old veterans and teachers. And somewhere, far from the core worlds, on a quiet green planet, the man who changed everything still lived. Elias Kane walked slowly along the same river where he had once built his first shelter. The valley had changed and no longer wild and broken. Fields of silver grass now covered the land. Children, both human and Varkai, played together, their laughter echoing under the twin suns. He stopped near a small hill where a group of settlers had placed a stone monument. The writing on it was simple: "To those who chose mercy over victory." Kane traced the carved words with his fingers. His hair was gray now, his steps slower. But his eyes, still sharp, still calm, watched the horizon with quiet pride. Sierra approached carrying a woven basket. Her scales shimmered in the sunlight, though faint lines of age marked her face, too. "You always come here at dawn," she said gently. "Habit," Kane replied. "Old soldiers never stop watching the sky," she smiled softly. "The sky no longer burns. You made sure of that." Kane looked at her, then at the monument again. "No," he said. "We did." Over the years, humans and Varkai had built something unthinkable, an alliance. Trade ships traveled freely between their worlds. Schools taught both languages. Mixed crews served together on exploration vessels that reached beyond known space, but not everyone agreed with peace. There were still voices, loud, angry, calling Kane a traitor, a coward who had betrayed his species. Others called him something else, the man who reminded humanity what it meant to be human. One evening, a small shuttle landed near the settlement. A group of young officers stepped out, human and Varkai alike, wearing the insignia of the new Joint Galactic Fleet. Their leader, a woman with dark hair tied back neatly, approached Kane and saluted. "Commander Elias Kane?" she asked respectfully. Kane smiled faintly. "Retired," he said. "But yes," she handed him a data pad. "By order of the Galactic Council, you are invited to the capital world. The Council wishes to honor you for your role in ending the Great War." Kane raised an eyebrow.
"Honor me?"
He chuckled softly. "They used to want to hang me," the officer smiled. "History has changed, sir. You're no longer the man who defied orders. You're the man who gave us peace." Sira watched quietly as Kane read the invitation. He looked up at the sky, now calm, bright, endless. "Tell them," he said at last. "I already have everything I need right here." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "Understood, Commander." The team saluted and left. As their shuttle disappeared into the clouds, Sira turned to him. "You could have gone. Let them see what Mercy built," Kane smiled. "They don't need to see me. They only need to remember." That night, as the twin moons rose, Kane sat by the river with a small recording device in his hands. He pressed the record button, his voice calm and steady. "This message is for whoever finds it. Years ago, I made a choice, to save instead of destroy. It wasn't courage. It wasn't defiance. It was simply the right thing." He paused, glancing at the stars. "War teaches us to win, but peace teaches us who we are. If you ever stand where I once stood, if you ever have to choose between victory and mercy, choose mercy, because victory fades, but mercy lasts." He ended the recording, placed it beside the monument, and stood. Weeks later, Sira found the device, still glowing faintly. But Kane was gone. No one saw him leave. Some said he went into the forest to die quietly. Others said he joined the stars. Whatever the truth, his name remained, carved not just in stone, but in hearts. Decades later, on a distant colony world, a human child and a Varkai cub stood before a grand memorial shaped like two hands, one human, one alien, reaching toward each other. The inscription read, "He could have won the war, but saved their cubs instead." The teacher's voice echoed through the crowd of students. Elias Kane's choice changed everything. He taught us that peace is not given, it is chosen, and it begins with mercy. The children stared in silence for a moment. Then the young human girl whispered, "Do you think I could be like him one day?" The Varkai cub smiled, his scales glinting in the sun. "You already are," he said. "You're his legacy." As the camera pulls back, the world below shines with cities of glass and silver, human and alien together. The stars above burn softly, no longer symbols of war, but of hope. And somewhere among them, in the quiet depths of space, a faint voice echoes from an ancient transmission. Mercy is not weakness. It's what makes us human.